Recently, I was asked this really great question about the historicity, the historical nature of Christianity. The question was this: Pastor Mike, can you name some of the physical or scientific evidence that proves that Jesus was here? Awesome question. The early Christians relied on the eyewitness reports of people who saw Jesus, listened to Jesus, witnessed his miracles, and most importantly, witnessed him risen from the dead. What we call the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and the writings of the New Testament like Peter and Paul, so often came back to this idea, not just believe us because we say so, but these are eyewitnesses' real historical accounts. In fact, Luke, who was a first century physician, obviously a man with lots of intelligence, he wrote these words at the start of his gospel. Many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who, from the first, were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. With this in mind, since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I too decided to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the certainty of the things that you have been taught. You catch that? Luke is digging into this. He's writing to a guy named Theophilus. He wants him to be certain of his Christian faith. He doesn't just say, believe me, or because I say so. No, instead, I have researched it. I have gone back to the eyewitnesses. I've studied the accounts, and I'm writing this orderly account now for you. This is what all the early Christians said and did. When the Apostle Paul was speaking to an early government official who was skeptical of Christianity, he said, hey, these things were not done in a corner. What I'm saying to you is reasonable and true, and there are eyewitnesses who can back up my testimony. In fact, one of the really cool things about Christianity is that the Gospels were written so early after the events themselves happened. By comparison, I've just been reading some Greek mythology about the Trojan War. Remember the Trojan horse and the big battle with like Odysseus and Achilles and everyone at the ancient city of Troy. Supposedly Homer wrote that epic hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years after these battles happened in Troy. So after, who knows, 300, 400, 500 years, like how much could the story get twisted or invented or things all the eyewitnesses are dead. Christianity is not like that. Christianity was written within the generation of those who saw Jesus, and they spoke about it often. Paul did, Peter did. James, the brother of Jesus, his heart was transformed by seeing his brother Jesus resurrected. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15, the Apostle Paul talks about 500 witnesses who had seen Jesus, and they gave their testimony to that first generation who was emboldened to share the message of Jesus. Now, there are extra biblical authors or people who don't write Bible books that talk about Jesus. There's the Jewish historian named Josephus and a number of others. But what's so cool is that we have these historical documents that date really back early that allow us to say, wow, this is not some myth or legend or fable. If these guys were making up crazy stories about Jesus and all these like people said, no, I was there, that's not how it happened, they could have squashed Christianity quick. But instead, what do we find? We find these people who are sharing the message. In fact, they're willing to suffer and die for the message because they themselves witnessed with their own eyes that Jesus was true. He died on the cross for the forgiveness of their sins, and he was raised from the grave. Now, if you're curious about this, or maybe you just want more evidence for the Christian faith, I would encourage you to look up online the word, or the phrase, I should say, Christian apologetics. It's a confusing phrase. Apologetics doesn't mean apologies, like here's all the things that Christians have done wrong. Apologetics is the fancy word for the defense of the Christian faith. Like, what are the reasonable things? What's the evidence? What's the archaeology? What's the mindset that would make a thinking person say, wow, there's something to this? This isn't just blind faith. This is faith based on historical fact. So if you want to dig deeper on Christian apologetics, especially the apologetics of Easter morning and the resurrected Jesus, I would encourage you to dig into it. I love this stuff when I was growing up as a Christian. I shared a little bit of it with you today. I hope you can find so much more, because Jesus is risen. And because he is, he's with us, he saves us, and we have the hope of heaven in front of us. I pray that you believe it deep in your heart, not as some myth or fable, but as fact, as truth.